At dusk, the twin harbors of Carthage glow gold beneath the sinking sun. Merchant ships glide silently into the circular military port, the Carthaginian, one of the most sophisticated naval installations of the ancient world. Stone quays form a perfect ring. Warships rest in individual docks carved into the perimeter. At the center stands an island command platform, a naval headquarters designed for control and surveillance. It is peaceful, it is prosperous, and within decades, this city will be burned to ash. The Roman statesman Cato the Elder would end every speech, no matter the topic, with the same words: Carthago delenda est, Carthage must be destroyed. Why? Why would Rome insist not on victory but annihilation? To understand that decision, we must return to the beginning, to a rivalry that reshaped the Mediterranean world. By the 3rd century BC, two powers dominated the western Mediterranean. Carthage, a maritime commercial empire founded by Phoenician settlers, traditionally dated to 814 BCE. Archaeological layers at Bursa Hill confirm early Phoenician urbanization consistent with that tradition. The city grew not through conquest alone, but through trade, diplomacy, and naval supremacy. Rome, a rising land-based republic, having subdued much of the Italian peninsula through alliance networks and relentless warfare. Polybius, the Greek historian writing in the 2nd century BC, later described this era as the moment when the Mediterranean became a contest for universal rule. He believed the clash between Rome and Carthage was not accidental, it was structural. Carthage ruled the sea, Rome ruled the land. There was only one Mediterranean. Carthage was not merely a city. It was the center of a commercial web stretching from North Africa to Spain, from Sardinia to western Sicily. Purple dye, silver from Iberian mines, grain from North Africa, timber, ivory, slaves, goods flowed through Carthaginian ports. Unlike Rome's citizen army republic, Carthage was governed by an oligarchic merchant elite. Two annually elected magistrates, Sephates, presided over state affairs. A council of elders directed policy. Wealthy families financed fleets and military campaigns. Aristotle, in his Politics, even described Carthage's constitution as one of the most stable in the ancient world, a remarkable compliment from a Greek philosopher. But stability and prosperity breed rivals. Can a trade empire survive in a world where expansionist republics rise? Is commercial dominance more fragile than military supremacy? And if two superpowers emerge in the same geopolitical basin, is war avoidable? Polybius thought not. The island of Sicily lay between Italy and North Africa, fertile, strategic, contested. Greek city-states had long fought Carthaginian influence there. Rome initially had little involvement beyond the Italian mainland, but in 264 BCE, a local conflict in the Sicilian city of Messana drew both Rome and Carthage into intervention. Neither intended total war, both miscalculated. The First Punic War had begun. It would last 23 years, one of the longest continuous conflicts of the ancient world. At the start of the war, Rome had almost no naval tradition. Carthage possessed centuries of maritime expertise, and yet within a few years Rome constructed a massive fleet. According to Polybius, the Romans copied a captured Carthaginian ship design and mass-produced their own versions. More importantly, they innovated. They installed the corvus, a boarding bridge that converted naval battles into infantry combat, neutralizing Carthaginian seamanship by turning sea battles into land engagements. This was Rome's defining trait. When outmatched, adapt. Carthage relied heavily on mercenary forces, Iberians, Gauls, Libyans. Rome relied on citizen soldiers and allied Italian manpower reserves. Modern historian Adrian Goldsworthy emphasizes this difference as decisive. Rome could absorb catastrophic losses and replenish armies repeatedly. Carthage fought efficiently. Rome fought relentlessly. The First Punic War became a war of endurance. Fleet after fleet was destroyed by storms and battle. Tens of thousands died at sea. neither side achieved decisive land dominance in Sicily. But endurance favors the deeper reservoir. After 2 decades of grinding war, Rome financed one final fleet reportedly through private aristocratic funding. At the Battle of the Aegates Islands, Roman forces decisively defeated the Carthaginian navy. Carthage sued for peace. Terms were harsh. Sicily ceded to Rome heavy indemnity payments. Recognition of Roman dominance in the region. Carthage had lost its first great war, but it was not broken. Defeat created internal crisis. Mercenaries unpaid after the war revolted in North Africa, the so-called Truceless War, described vividly by Polybius as especially brutal. Carthage barely survived, yet it adapted under Hamilcar. Barca, Carthage shifted focus to Iberia. There, rich silver mines provided revenue to pay indemnities and rebuild military capacity. Modern historians such as Dexter Hoyos argue that Carthage's recovery was surprisingly rapid. Rome watched carefully if Rome had already won Sicily. If Carthage had accepted defeat, why would the rivalry continue? Because defeat did not erase rivalry, it transformed it. And in Iberia, a new Carthaginian power base was emerging, one led by a family that would nearly bring Rome to its knees. The First Punic War had proven one thing: Rome could survive humiliation, but the next war would test something else. Could Rome survive annihilation? A boy in Iberia once swore eternal hatred against Rome. His name was Hannibal, and he would change everything. The dust rises first, then the sound a low, growing tremor beneath tens of thousands of marching feet. It is August to 16 BCE. The sun hangs brutally over the plains near Cannae in southern Italy. Heat presses down like a physical weight. Roman legionaries, drawn up in dense formation, wait for the order to advance across. The field stands Hannibal Barca. He is 30 years old. Behind him, Iberians, Gauls, Libyans, cavalry on the wings, veterans hardened by years of marching through hostile territory. By the end of the day, somewhere between 50,000 and 70,000 Romans will lie dead. Polybius would later call it one of the most complete defeats in military history. Livy would describe rivers running red. Modern military academies still study what happened here, but the real question is not how Hannibal won. The question is why Rome did not fall. Years earlier, in Iberia, a boy stood beside his father, Hamilcar Barca. According to Livy, Hamilcar made his son swear eternal enmity toward Rome. Whether literal or literary embellishment, the symbolism is powerful. The Barcid family carried the humiliation of the First Punic War personally. After Rome's victory into 41 BCE, Carthage had paid massive indemnities, 10,000 talents over 50 years. But in Iberia, Hamilcar rebuilt Carthaginian strength, silver. Mines near modern Cartagena filled Carthage's treasury. Armies were trained, alliances formed. When Hamilcar died, command passed to Hasdrubal and then to Hannibal. Polybius, writing within living memory of the war, portrays Hannibal as bold, charismatic, and relentless. Rome underestimated him. Into 19 BCE, Hannibal attacked Saguntum, a city allied with Rome but south of the Ebro River, technically within Carthage's sphere of influence. Rome protested. Carthage refused to recall Hannibal. War resumed. The Second Punic War had begun, but Hannibal would not fight it conventionally. Into 18 BCE, Hannibal did the unthinkable. Instead of defending Iberia or North Africa, he marched his army north across the Pyrenees, through southern Gaul, and toward the Alps. Ancient sources describe war elephants climbing narrow mountain paths under snow and rockfall. Modern historians debate the exact alpine pass used. Candidates include the Cal de la Traversit and others, but archaeological findings of ancient animal dung deposits in alpine regions suggest plausibility of the route. Polybius personally traversed parts of the Alps to reconstruct the journey. The march was catastrophic. Estimates suggest Hannibal began with perhaps 90,000 infantry and 12,000 cavalry. He likely entered Italy with fewer than half, yet he had achieved the impossible. Rome did not expect invasion from the north. How do you defend against an enemy who rewrites the rules of war? Is genius defined by audacity or by sustainability? And can one commander overcome a republic built for attrition? Hannibal defeated Roman forces at the Trebia River 218 BCE using ambush tactics in freezing conditions. The following year, at Lake Trasimene, he executed one of history's largest ambushes, destroying a Roman army trapped between hills and water. Livy describes panic, fog, chaos. Rome responded with desperation. They appointed a dictator, Quintus Fabius Maximus. Fabius refused to fight Hannibal directly. He shadowed him, harassed. Supply lines avoided pitched battle. Romans mocked him as Cunctator the Delayer. But Fabius understood something fundamental. Hannibal could not replace losses easily. Rome could. Modern military historian Adrian Goldsworthy emphasizes this turning point. Rome shifted from pride-driven confrontation to strategic patience, but Rome's political culture despised caution. The Senate demanded decisive engagement, which led to Cannae. The Roman army assembled was massive, perhaps 80,000 infantry. They intended overwhelming force. Hannibal arranged his forces in a convex formation, placing weaker troops in the center, stronger African infantry on the flanks. As Romans pushed forward, the center deliberately collapsed inward, transforming into a concave trap. Carthaginian cavalry crushed Roman horsemen and encircled the infantry from behind. It was annihilation. Polybius calculates 70,000 Roman dead in a single day. Modern scholars suggest 500,000-600,000. As more realistic, still catastrophic, entire consular armies vanished. The Roman political elite was decimated. This should have ended the Republic, but it didn't. Why didn't Hannibal march on Rome? This question has haunted historians for centuries. Ancient sources claim Maharbal, Hannibal's cavalry commander, allegedly said, "You know how to win a victory, Hannibal, but not how to use it." But modern scholars question the authenticity of that quote. The reality was logistical. Hannibal lacked siege equipment. He lacked reinforcements. From Carthage, he lacked political unity at home. Carthage's ruling elite hesitated to commit full support. Historian Dexter Hoyos argues Carthage never fully invested in Hannibal's Italian campaign, a fatal strategic limitation. Hannibal could devastate Roman armies. He could not dismantle Roman infrastructure. After Cannae, Rome did something extraordinary. They did not negotiate. They refused ransom for prisoners, an unprecedented act of psychological resistance. They lowered age requirements for military service. They armed slaves. They expanded recruitment into allied territories. Polybius notes that Rome's strength lay not just in arms, but in its civic structure. It was a war machine disguised as a republic. For over a decade, Hannibal remained in Italy. He won engagements. He gained some southern allies, but major cities, including Rome itself, remained loyal. Gradually, Roman forces avoided decisive battles. Instead, they attacked Carthaginian holdings elsewhere. In Iberia, Publius Cornelius Scipio, later Scipio Africanus, launched campaigns cutting off Hannibal's support base. By 206 BCE, Rome controlled Iberia. Hannibal was isolated. Scipio proposed a radical strategy: invade North Africa, force Carthage to recall Hannibal. The Roman Senate hesitated but eventually allowed it. Scipio forged alliances with Numidian Prince Massinissa, whose cavalry would prove decisive. Hannibal was recalled home. After 15 years in Italy, the final confrontation approached. Unlike Cannae, Zama was controlled, calculated. Hannibal attempted to use war elephants early in the battle. Scipio created lanes in his infantry formation, allowing elephants to pass through harmlessly. Roman and Numidian cavalry then overwhelmed Carthaginian flanks, replicating Hannibal's own encirclement tactics. Hannibal was defeated. For the first time, the peace terms were devastating. Carthage lost overseas territories, fleet reduced. 210 ships, massive indemnities imposed, forbidden from waging war without Roman approval. Carthage survived, but it was strategically crippled. Here lies the paradox. After Zama, Carthage complied, it paid indemnities, it rebuilt economically peacefully. Archaeological evidence suggests agricultural productivity in North Africa increased significantly in the 2nd century BC. Carthage prospered again, and that prosperity disturbed Rome. Cato the Elder visited Carthage. Decades later, he returned alarmed at its recovery. Every speech ended the same way: Carthage must be destroyed. Hannibal proved Rome could bleed. He demonstrated tactical genius. Military theorists from Napoleon to Schlieffen studied Cannae as the model of double envelopment, but strategically, Rome's resilience prevailed. Modern historian Richard Miles argues that the Second Punic War hardened Roman psychology. It created a culture of existential warfare. Rome learned that survival sometimes meant total elimination. Of rivals, the war did not end hatred, it deepened it. If Hannibal had won at Zama, would Rome have become the destroyed city instead? History often hinges not on brilliance but on endurance. Carthage had lost. It had accepted peace. It rebuilt quietly. But Rome had learned something terrifying. As long as Carthage existed, Rome felt vulnerable, and fear, when left unresolved, becomes policy. For over a century, two titans of the ancient world, Rome and Carthage, were locked in a colossal struggle for dominance over the Mediterranean. This was the era of the Punic Wars, a series of conflicts so vast, so bloody, that they would decide the fate of Western civilization. Carthage, a maritime empire founded by the Phoenicians. On the coast of modern-day Tunisia was a beacon of commerce and naval power. Its harbors bustled with ships from across the known world, and its wealth was legendary. Rome, on the other hand, was a rising land power on the Italian peninsula, a republic built on discipline, military might, and an insatiable ambition for expansion. The clash of these two giants was inevitable. The First Punic War was a grueling 23-year naval struggle primarily fought for control of Sicily. After immense losses on both sides, Rome, demonstrating its incredible ability to adapt, built a massive fleet from scratch and eventually defeated the Carthaginian navy. Carthage was forced to cede Sicily and pay a hefty indemnity. This defeat was humiliating, but it didn't break the Carthaginian spirit. In fact, it planted the seeds of a deep-seated desire for revenge, a desire that would be embodied by one family, the Barcas. Enter Hannibal Barca, a brilliant Carthaginian general. After the war, he took his young son, Hannibal, to a temple and made him swear a sacred oath to forever be an enemy of Rome. Hamilcar then set his sights on Spain, establishing a new Carthaginian power base, rich in silver mines and manpower, to prepare for the next round. After Hamilcar's death, this mission fell to his son, Hannibal Barca, a name that would soon strike terror into the heart of every Roman citizen. Into 18 BC, Hannibal unleashed the Second Punic War, a conflict that would become the stuff of legend. He did the unthinkable, leading a massive army, complete with war elephants. He marched from Spain over the treacherous Pyrenees and the frozen Alps, and descended into Italy. It was one of the most audacious military maneuvers in history. The Romans were caught completely off guard. Hannibal was not just a commander. He was a strategic genius. He inflicted a series of devastating defeats on the Romans at the battles of Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and most famously at Cannae. The Battle of Cannae in 216 BC was a tactical masterpiece and Rome's darkest day. Hannibal, though outnumbered, used a brilliant double envelopment tactic. He allowed the Roman legions to push through. His weak center then had his stronger flanks fold in and encircle the entire Roman army. The result was a slaughter. Tens of thousands of Roman soldiers were killed. The Republic was on its knees, its very survival in question. For over a decade, Hannibal rampaged through Italy, a seemingly unstoppable force. But he had a critical weakness. He lacked the heavy siege equipment and reinforcements needed to take the city. Of Rome itself, while Hannibal was tied down in Italy, a new Roman hero emerged, Scipio. Recognizing that the only way to beat Hannibal was to take the fight to Carthage, Scipio led a Roman army to North Africa. This bold move forced Carthage to recall Hannibal from Italy to defend his homeland. The two greatest generals of the age finally met head-on at the Battle of Zama in 202 BC. This time, it was Scipio who proved to be the superior tactician. He studied Hannibal's methods and developed countermeasures, particularly for the war elephants. The Roman legions crushed the Carthaginian army. Hannibal had finally been defeated. The terms of surrender after the Second Punic War were crippling. Carthage lost all its overseas territories, its navy was dismantled, and it was forced to pay another enormous indemnity. Crucially, it was forbidden from waging war without Rome's permission. For the next 50 years, Carthage endured as a weakened but still prosperous merchant city, dutifully paying its debts to Rome. But even in its diminished state, the city's commercial success sparked jealousy and fear in Rome. In the Roman Senate, one voice relentlessly called for Carthage's complete and utter destruction. Cato the Elder, at the end of every speech, no matter the topic, he would declare, "Carthago delenda est." Carthage must be destroyed. This sentiment grew, fueled by paranoia and a lingering thirst for vengeance. The Romans were just waiting for an excuse, a pretext to finish the job once and for all. That pretext came in 149 BC. Carthage, provoked by repeated raids from its neighbor, Numidia, a Roman ally, finally raised an army to defend itself. This was a direct violation of the treaty. For Rome, this was the final justification they needed. The Third Punic War began, but this was not a war between equals. It was an execution. A massive Roman army landed in Africa and laid siege to the city of Carthage. The Carthaginians, knowing this was a fight for their very existence, mounted a heroic and desperate defense. The siege lasted for 3 long, brutal years. The citizens melted down statues for bronze, women cut their hair to make ropes for catapults, and they fought with a ferocity born of despair. They held out against starvation, disease, and constant Roman assaults. But in the spring of 146 BC, the final Roman assault, led by Scipio Aemilianus, the adopted grandson of the great Scipio who defeated Hannibal, broke through the city's formidable walls. What followed was one of the most horrific sacks of a city in ancient history. For 6 days and 6 nights, the Roman soldiers went from house to house, slaughtering the inhabitants. The fighting was merciless, conducted in narrow streets and on rooftops. The city became a vision of hell, filled with screams, fire, and the clash of steel. When the slaughter finally subsided, the 50,000 survivors, out of a pre-siege population of perhaps 500,000, were sold into slavery. The Roman Senate then gave the final, chilling order: the city of Carthage, a jewel of the Mediterranean, for over 700 years, was to be systematically demolished. Buildings were torn down, stone by stone. Then the Romans set the ruins ablaze. The fires burned for more than 2 weeks, consuming what was left of the once proud city. Legend says the Romans then sowed the land with salt to ensure that nothing would ever grow there again. While historians debate the literal truth of the salting, the symbolic message was clear and terrifying. Carthage was to be erased from history. The fall of Carthage was more than just the end of a city. It was the end of an era. With its greatest rival gone, Rome's dominance over the Mediterranean was absolute. The destruction sent a brutal message to the rest of the world: resist Rome, and you will be annihilated. From the ashes of Carthage, the Roman Empire would rise, its foundations cemented by the conquest and complete obliteration of its most formidable enemy. The Punic Wars were over, and the world belonged to Rome. Imagine a city so utterly destroyed that its very name was almost erased from history, a city that stood as a titan, a rival to the mighty Roman Republic. This is the story of the fall of Carthage, a tale of ambition, desperation, and total annihilation. For over a century, Rome and Carthage were locked in a struggle for dominance. Over the Mediterranean, two massive wars, the First and Second Punic Wars, had left both empires bloodied but with Rome holding the upper hand. Carthage, once a sprawling naval power, was stripped of its territories, its navy dismantled, and forced to pay crippling war debts. They were forbidden from waging war without Rome's permission for 50 years. A fragile peace held. Carthage, resilient as ever, focused on trade and rebuilt its wealth, becoming a prosperous commercial hub once again. But in Rome, old wounds festered. A powerful political faction, led by the senator Cato the Elder, saw Carthage's revival not as a success story, but as a future threat. Cato ended every speech he gave, regardless of the topic, with the same chilling words: Carthago delenda est, Carthage must be destroyed. This constant drumbeat of fear and hatred slowly poisoned the minds of the Roman Senate. They were just waiting for an excuse. That excuse came in 149 BC. Carthage's neighbor, the kingdom of Numidia, a Roman ally, began raiding Carthaginian lands. Bound by the treaty, Carthage couldn't retaliate without Rome's consent. They appealed to the Senate time and time again, but Rome deliberately ignored them, allowing the raids to continue. Finally, pushed to the brink, Carthage raised an army to defend itself. It was exactly what Cato and his faction had been waiting for. Rome declared this defensive act a breach of the treaty and declared the Third Punic War. A massive Roman army landed in North Africa. The terrified Carthaginians, hoping to avoid war, offered to surrender. Rome's demands were severe. First, they demanded 300 children from noble families as hostages. The heartbroken Carthaginians complied. Then Rome demanded they surrender all of their weapons and armor. With heavy hearts, they turned over mountains of bronze and iron. Finally, with Carthage completely disarmed and defenseless, the Romans delivered their final, unthinkable ultimatum. The city of Carthage itself was to be abandoned. Its people had to move at least 10 miles inland, away from the sea that was their lifeblood. This was a death sentence: to abandon their homes, their temples, their history. It was too much to bear. The Carthaginian envoys returned with the news, and the city erupted not in despair, but in furious defiance. The gates were barred. The people, from men and women to children, worked day and night, turning the city into a fortress. They melted down statues for bronze and even cut off their hair to braid into ropes for catapults. For 3 long years, Carthage held out against the Roman siege, a testament to their incredible will to survive. But the end was inevitable. In the spring of 146 BC, the Roman general Scipio Aemilianus launched the final assault. For 6 days and 6 nights, brutal street-to-street fighting raged through the city. The Romans showed no mercy, slaughtering everyone they found. Finally, the last 50,000 survivors, starving and exhausted, surrendered in the citadel. What happened next is one of history's greatest tragedies. The city was systematically plundered and then set ablaze, burning for 17 days straight. When the flames finally died down, the Romans demolished what was left, stone by stone. The story that they salted the earth to ensure nothing would ever grow again is likely a later invention, but it captures the spirit of Rome's intention: complete and total erasure. Carthage, the jewel of the Mediterranean, was wiped off the map. Its people were sold into slavery, its culture scattered to the winds. A civilization was gone, a chilling reminder of how brutally the victors can write history. The Roman army stands outside Carthage's triple walls. Siege towers creak. Legionnaires adjust armor under the glaring sun. The air smells faintly of salt from the harbor and smoke from cooking fires within the city. For a moment, it seems the impossible has been avoided. Carthage surrenders, weapons are handed over, hostages, the children of elite families are paraded before the Roman consuls. The population exhales a collective sigh of relief, but this relief is fleeting. Rome's true demand is revealed. Appian recounts the moment vividly. The Romans declared that Carthage could not simply exist within its walls. The city itself must be abandoned, relocated inland, and destroyed. A whisper passes through the streets. We are to burn our own homes. The city has been trapped, and the trap snaps. After decades of tension, Carthage sought to comply. It had delivered weapons to the Romans, handed over hundreds of hostages, paid decades of indemnities. From a legal standpoint, Carthage had fulfilled its obligations under the 201 BCE treaty. Yet Rome's aim had shifted from compliance to elimination. Modern historian Richard Miles argues that the Senate's strategy was psychological as much as military, to force Carthage into moral and strategic impossibility, ensuring that any resistance would appear as justified rebellion. Polybius notes the precision of Rome's demands. Every act of submission became a step toward an irreversible choice: fight or die. Was resistance the only moral choice? Could compliance ever have spared the city? What does survival mean when survival is slavery? Faced with impossible terms, Carthage begins transforming itself into a defensive fortress. Women and children contribute to the war effort, melting temple bronzes into weapons. Blacksmiths hammer ceaselessly. Arrowheads, blades, and improvised siege devices emerge. Walls and streets are fortified with barricades and traps. Carthage's population, elite and commoners alike, mobilizes in extraordinary coordination. This is not a professional army alone. It is a city at war. Appian writes, even the women and the old men joined in crafting arms and erecting barricades. The city had become a hive of resistance. The twist is not tactical. It is moral and psychological. Rome has created conditions for war and is confronted by a populace that refuses to submit. The Carthaginian Senate and military leadership convene under the triple walls. Every option has been exhausted. Compliance guarantees the death of their civic identity. Resistance risks destruction of lives and homes. The decision is unanimous: fight. Every citizen participates. Every street is prepared for combat. Every building may become a defensive structure. Rome's ultimatum has failed in its psychological objective. Carthage will not surrender. Carthage will resist to the bitter end. Rome's legions prepare for a siege. Carthage braces for the 3-year ordeal that will follow. Starvation, disease, and relentless assault await. Polybius notes that the forthcoming siege would test the limits of human endurance and urban fortification, becoming one of the most documented examples of prolonged urban warfare in antiquity. How far can desperation drive a civilization? Can collective courage overcome logistical impossibility? Is resistance noble or suicidal? Carthage has chosen defiance. The city, once a commercial capital, is now a fortress. Every street, every workshop, every citizen is now part of the war effort. Smoke curls from every corner of Carthage. The smell of baking bread, a ghost of normal life, mingles with the acrid scent of forge fires and molten metal. This is a city transformed. Women, their faces etched with grim determination, haul water through streets cluttered with rubble. Children, their games long forgotten, gather and prepare sling stones for the defenders on the walls. In makeshift forges, the rhythmic clang of hammers never ceases. Blacksmiths, their bodies slick with sweat, melt down priceless bronze statues and sacred temple vessels, reforging a city's heritage into swords and arrowheads. Every citizen, from the youngest child to the oldest elder, is now a soldier. Outside the colossal walls, the might of Rome is on full display, a near-perfect encirclement. of legions, a sea of steel and leather, squeezes the city. Towering siege engines scrape the sky, their wooden frames groaning in anticipation. Battering rams, capped with polished bronze, gleam menacingly under the Mediterranean sun. Then, the first volley, the sky darkens with stones launched from catapults. They crash into the city, not with precision, but with brutal, indiscriminate force, shattering market stalls, splintering temple columns, and tearing through the hastily built barricades. As the historian Appian wrote, the Carthaginians prepared for war as though their city were their only life, because it was. Carthage, once the jewel of Mediterranean trade, is now a fortress city, a living bastion. Survival has become a total occupation for every soul within its walls. After Rome delivered its shocking ultimatum in 149 BCE, abandon your city and rebuild it inland, away from the sea, the leaders of Carthage knew a traditional field. Battle was suicide. Their only hope lay in the city itself. Its legendary defensive architecture, massive stone walls, triple-layered fortifications, and imposing watchtowers became the foundation of their desperate resistance. Archaeological digs on Bursa Hill confirm what ancient texts tell us. The walls were reinforced, and the city's narrow, winding streets were choked with barricades, creating deadly funnels for any invading force. Both Appian and Polybius marvel at the city's incredible urban improvisation. Nothing was sacred, nothing was spared. Temples became strongpoints, granaries became armories. The entire civilian population, a bustling hub of merchants, artisans, and families, became the unyielding backbone of the defense. Historian Richard Miles notes, "How rare this level of total mobilization is in ancient history. This wasn't just an army defending a city. It was an entire society transforming itself into a weapon, a fusion of organized military strategy and mass civilian defiance." The central questions of this conflict hang heavy in the smoky air. How long can one city, however defiant, resist the most disciplined and relentless army of the ancient world? Can raw courage, desperate creativity, and sheer determination truly offset overwhelming force? And what ultimately is the limit of a civilian population's contribution to war? The Romans, as always, are methodical. Their siege engines, the catapults, the ballistae, the towering assault ladders dominate the horizon, a constant, terrifying reminder of the power arrayed against the city. Their navy has sealed the harbor, a cork in a bottle, cutting off any hope of resupply or escape by sea. Roman patrols scout the perimeter relentlessly, ensuring no Carthaginian force can break out and no help can get in. But inside the walls, a different kind of industry thrives. Civilians and soldiers work side by side, their ingenuity fueled by desperation. They construct improvised weapons, from wicked spiked barricades to their own makeshift catapults. In an act of profound sacrifice, the women of Carthage cut their long hair, weaving the tresses into tough, resilient bowstrings and torsion ropes for them. War machines, bronze statues of gods and heroes are melted down into a steady stream of arrowheads and spear points. The city's streets, once pathways for commerce, are now fortified death traps, every alley and intersection designed to bleed the Roman legions. Polybius describes a city that had become a living weapon. Every block was a fortress, every building a bastion, every alley a potential ambush. Rome had expected a quick, decisive victory. They expected the Carthaginians, faced with impossible odds, to surrender. Instead, they found a city that fought back with an almost supernatural resilience. The psychological impact on the Roman soldiers was profound. Their disciplined advances were met with a ferocious, seemingly endless resistance from every window and rooftop. The Roman command, accustomed to swift campaigns, began to realize this would not be a short affair. The sheer ingenuity of the Carthaginian defense prolonged the siege far beyond anyone's expectations. turning a planned conquest into a grueling, bloody stalemate. A new, stark question began to emerge on the Roman side. Can human resolve truly overcome starvation and the brutal mechanics of siege warfare? Carthage's resistance is anything but passive. This is not a population simply waiting for the inevitable. Under the cover of darkness, citizen soldiers launch daring night raids on Roman camps, disrupting supply lines and sowing chaos. From the highest towers, signal fires flicker, transmitting coded messages to coordinate the defense. Across the sprawling city, even the children play their part, scurrying through the besieged streets to move supplies, carry messages, and tend to the wounded. This is not an ordinary city under siege. It is a society united in a final existential act of defiance. Day after day, Roman siege engines rain destruction upon Carthage. Yet day after day, the defenders fight on. They repel assaults on the main walls with fire and stone. They use their street barricades to lure Roman cohorts into narrow kill zones, inflicting heavy casualties. And deep within the city, under constant bombardment, the production of weapons and the distribution of supplies continues. Appian emphasizes the city's morale, describing it as simply astonishing. In the face of a better equipped, better fed, and numerically superior enemy, the people of Carthage displayed an unwavering, unbreakable resolve. But as the first year of the siege grinds to a close, the grim realities of their situation begin to take their toll. Disease, born of overcrowding and poor sanitation, begins to spread through the packed city districts. The food stocks, once plentiful, are dwindling to dangerously low levels. Starvation and sheer exhaustion are a cancer, weakening both the civilian population and the soldiers on the walls. Yet the city refuses to surrender. Hasdrubal, the Boetharch, the Carthaginian general, and the city's civic leaders continue to organize the defense with grim efficiency. The streets have become workshops, homes have become strong points, and the entire population remains fanatically committed to survival. The accounts of both Polybius and Appian highlight this siege as one of the most complete examples of total urban warfare in all of antiquity. How long can morale withstand the gnawing pains of starvation and the terror of constant bombardment? At what point does innovation and collective spirit simply run out? When does heroic courage curdle into pointless futility? Carthage has survived the first year. It is battered, exhausted, and starving, but it is not broken. The Romans, however, are methodical. Their encirclement will only tighten. Starvation and disease will only intensify, and soon a new Roman commander will arrive on the scene, a man who will bring the final, brutal assault that will decide the fate of this legendary city forever. The horizon trembles with the sound of disciplined feet. Dust rises in long, measured columns as Roman legions march across the North African plains. The sun is harsh, unrelenting. At their head rides Publius Cornelius Scipio, later known as Scipio Aemilianus, just 26 years old. His eyes, sharp and calculating, sweep over the city in the distance. Carthage, still defiant, still fortified, still alive. He does not underestimate what lies before him. The city is a maze of barricades, fortified streets, and improvisational weapons crafted by civilians. Every alley is a potential ambush. Every rooftop could host archers. Polybius records Scipio's thoughts in indirect narrative. The young general recognized that brute force alone would not end the siege. Patience, strategy, and precision were paramount. The trap is nearly complete. Carthage's defenders have endured nearly a year of siege. Starvation begins to nibble at the edges. Disease spreads in densely packed quarters, yet morale remains remarkably high. Civilians fight alongside soldiers. Women forge weapons. Children carry water and ammunition. Scipio's arrival changes the psychological calculus. A commander of remarkable foresight, He intends to finish what Rome began in 149 BCE to render Carthage incapable of resistance forever. Modern historians, including Adrian Goldsworthy and Richard Miles, highlight Scipio's brilliance in siegecraft. He combines engineering, diplomacy, and psychological warfare to systematically break Carthage's capacity to resist. Unlike his predecessors, Scipio views the siege as a multidimensional operation, a war of logistics, morale, and attrition. Miles of earthworks, palisades, and ramparts surround Carthage, effectively cutting off all landward escape. Roman ships seal access to the sea, preventing resupply or evacuation. Streets are barricaded. Rooftops bristle with weapons. Citizens scurry from gate to gate carrying provisions and tending the wounded. Inevitable doom, the city teeters on the edge of annihilation, yet defiance pulses through every street. How long can a city withstand complete isolation? Can human ingenuity and desperation offset logistical impossibility? At what point does resistance become self-destruction? By the second year of siege, Carthage is on the brink of collapse. Food stocks dwindle. Grain shortages become acute. Disease spreads rapidly through crowded streets and granaries, exacerbated by stagnant water and poor sanitation. Morale begins to falter, particularly among conscripted civilians and younger fighters. Polybius emphasizes the psychological toll. The people endured, yet their strength ebbed like the tide, visible in the sunken faces of men and women alike, in the wailing of children, in the relentless toil to maintain defenses. Carthage faces a brutal arithmetic. Every day survived brings closer starvation, but surrender means total annihilation. Rome does not merely wait. Scipio applies constant psychological pressure. Night raids keep Carthaginian defenders on edge. Siege engines batter walls relentlessly, testing weak points. Signal fires and false attacks suggest imminent breaches. This constant harassment forces Carthage into a defensive posture, consuming energy, resources, and morale. Modern scholars like Dexter Hoyos argue this is a textbook example of combined arms urban siege strategy. Not only physical isolation, but mental attrition designed to exhaust the enemy before the final assault. Despite starvation, disease, and isolation, Carthage's defenders launch daring sorties. Small groups of soldiers and civilians attempt to disrupt Roman siege works at night. Molten tar, boiling oil, and flaming projectiles slow siege tower advancement. Improvised weapons, slings, short-range catapults, sharpened stakes inflict casualties and force tactical reconsideration. This resistance is extraordinary, but the gap in numbers and logistics is widening. By 147 BCE, all land and sea exits are fully controlled by Roman forces. Scipio positions catapults, ballistae, and siege towers to strike every approach to the walls. Starvation is widespread. Carthaginian citizens consume stored grain at a frantic pace, then resort to eating livestock and even rats. Carthage is not yet breached, but the combination of physical, psychological, and logistical pressure has turned hope into desperation. Appian describes the scene. The city, proud and defiant, had been transformed into a cage, yet the inhabitants fought as though the very gods watched over them. Civilian morale teeters between defiance and despair. Military leaders prepare for the inevitable final assault. The population grows lean and weak, but their courage persists. Polybius emphasizes the human cost. Every day, life was measured in struggle. Every night, sleep was haunted by the cries of the wounded and the echoes of battering rams. Rome has achieved near total control, but the final act, the storming of the city, will determine the fate of tens of thousands. Can even the most disciplined army overcome such defiance without extreme violence? How much does human resilience matter when resources vanish? What lessons of survival and courage will endure after the walls fall? Carthage is encircled, starved, and exhausted. Every street and alley has been tested. Every tower and barricade has faced Roman assault. The final assault is imminent. The city that resisted for centuries now faces its apocalyptic hour. Smoke chokes the horizon, flames lick the sky as Carthage burns. The city that once glittered with wealth, trade, and culture now becomes a battlefield. Roman siege towers creak as they inch toward the walls. Catapults launch stones that splinter gates and crush rooftops. Screams echo through streets filled with barricades, makeshift weapons, and desperate civilians. Polybius describes the scene in grim detail, the cries of men, women, and children mingled with the clash of bronze and iron. The city's wealth, its treasures, its very soul was being consumed in fire and blood. This is no ordinary battle, this is annihilation. Carthage's resistance had endured for nearly 3 years. Civilian ingenuity had turned markets, temples, and homes into defensive fortifications. Siege, starvation, and disease had thinned the population, but morale persisted. Scipio Aemilianus's siege works encircled the city fully, making reinforcement or escape impossible. According to Appian, the Roman strategy was precise: weaken, isolate, and finally strike. Every tactic, every psychological maneuver, every bombardment led to this climactic moment. Historians agree this assault represents one of the earliest examples of total war, where an entire population, civilian and military, is considered part of the battlefield. Streets choked with debris, barricades, and corpses. Fire and smoke obscure vision, temples and palaces collapsing under siege weapons and arson, walls breached, towers toppled, defenders falling back alley by alley, harbors filled with overturned ships, blocked exits, and flames consuming stored goods. Mood is apocalyptic, horror and heroism intermingle. Every corner is a theater of desperation and death. Inside Carthage, the human cost is staggering. Thousands of civilians die daily from bombardment and fire. Disease spreads faster in crowded streets. Families are torn apart, trapped in burning buildings or crushed under rubble. Starving defenders fight not for conquest, but for the right to die on their own streets rather than surrender. Modern scholars, like Richard Miles, describe this siege as an early exemplar of modern total warfare. Civilians, military, and city infrastructure all considered part of the target. By the end of the siege, Roman legions control all major districts. Fires consume warehouses, palaces, and temples. The Temple of Eshmun collapses. Statues of gods are destroyed. Carthaginian defenders make their last stand on rooftops, in narrow alleys, and on the walls. Appian recounts that the final phase of resistance ended with mass slaughter. Few survive to tell the tale. Carthage, once a maritime empire rivaling Rome, ceases to exist as a political and military entity. Entire neighborhoods lie in ruins. Roman banners fly over smoldering walls. Starvation, disease, and slaughter leave tens of thousands dead. Survivors are enslaved, including women and children. Polybius records 50,000 enslaved, many deported to Rome to work as laborers, artisans, and entertainers. The city itself is leveled, its harbor, walls, and temples destroyed, its history erased. How does a civilization vanish yet persist in memory? Can even heroic resistance prevent annihilation against a totalitarian war machine? Does victory justify destruction when the population is indiscriminately affected? Carthage is gone, streets are empty, walls are crumbled, and the population enslaved or dead. Rome has achieved absolute military victory, yet history will debate the cost morally, culturally, and politically. Smoke drifts over the ruins of Carthage. Streets once filled with merchants, sailors, and scholars lie empty, littered with the debris of homes and temples. Fires still smolder in warehouses and granaries, the acrid scent of burned wood and melted bronze filling the air. Roman banners flap in the wind atop the shattered walls. The legions, disciplined and unyielding, walk silently through the streets. Their job is complete, Yet amidst the silence, the human cost is staggering. Families are gone, children orphaned, women enslaved. The city that had resisted for centuries now exists only in memory. Polybius writes, the city, once proud and rich, had become a vast heap of ruins. The victors walked among the corpses as if among fallen monuments of history itself. Why does the destruction of a city feel like the end of a world? Why does victory leave behind such emptiness? Carthage had been a powerful trading empire, its fleets controlling the Mediterranean, its merchants and artisans renowned for wealth and innovation. After two Punic Wars, Carthage was left weakened but resilient. It rebuilt, grew prosperous, and sought only peace. Rome, traumatized by Hannibal's earlier campaigns and wary of Carthage's recovery, had escalated strategically. Maecenas' encroachments and Roman political pressure left Carthage with no room for negotiation. By 149 BCE, Rome demanded surrender. By 147 BCE, Scipio's methodical siege had trapped, starved, and finally crushed the city. This is not only military history. It is a cautionary tale of power, fear, and human resilience. Can the memory of a civilization outlive its physical destruction? Survivors face a grim reality. Men and women are transported to Rome to labor in households, workshops, and mines. Starvation, disease, and combat have decimated the population. Witnessing the collapse of homes, temples, and entire neighborhoods leaves lasting scars. Modern scholars emphasize the unprecedented scale. Carthage was not just defeated, it was erased as a functioning political entity. Its commercial networks, administrative structures, and cultural institutions vanish almost overnight. Appian and Polybius both highlight the moral tension in Roman accounts. Victory was total, yet the means deliberate annihilation of a city and population weighed heavily in political and historical memory. By 146 BCE, Carthage exists only in ruins. Survivors are enslaved. Nobility executed or deported. The city's wealth, knowledge, and culture are lost or dispersed. North Africa is effectively under Roman influence, reshaping the Mediterranean balance of power. Polybius notes, the city that had resisted so fiercely now lay quiet, its echoes preserved only in memory and the chronicles of Rome. Though physically gone, Carthage survives in historical memory, as a symbol of resilience against overwhelming odds, as a cautionary tale of imperial expansion. In literature, art, and later Roman political discourse, Cato's mantra Carthago delenda est resonates for centuries. Modern scholars argue that the annihilation of Carthage set a precedent for the scale of total war and urban destruction in Mediterranean history. Did Rome truly win, or did it sacrifice its own moral compass in achieving victory? Carthage lies in ruins, but memory survives. History remembers both the victor and the vanquished. The Mediterranean coast is calm, the waves gently lapping against the shore. Birds circle above, the sun glimmers off modern sands, and yet beneath the tranquil surface, ghostly outlines of a lost city emerge. Carthage, once a bustling maritime hub, a center of trade, culture, and innovation, exists now only in memory, ruin, and scholarship. Its streets, temples, and harbors are gone, yet history whispers its story through time. Polybius and Appian record, the fall of Carthage was not merely military. It was psychological, cultural, and moral, a complete erasure intended to serve as a warning and a triumph. Did Rome win? Or did it lose something deeper, a piece of its soul in the ashes of Carthage? After 146 BCE, Rome becomes the unchallenged power of the Western Mediterranean. North Africa is absorbed into Roman influence. Trade routes redirect toward Italian ports. Carthage's former allies and territories now operate under Roman oversight or as client states, such as Numidia under Massinissa. Modern scholarship emphasizes the long-term consequences. The fall of Carthage marks the transition from a competitive Mediterranean with multiple powers to near hegemonic Roman dominance. Richard Miles writes, Carthage's destruction allowed Rome to impose a peace not just won on the battlefield, but enforced through intimidation, structure, and the memory of annihilation. Though Carthage is gone, its influence persists. Punic culture survives subtly in North African traditions. Roman political culture is shaped by the precedent of total destruction. Military theorists reference Carthage's fall as both lesson and warning. Historians like Adrian Goldsworthy argue that Rome's calculated obliteration of Carthage reflects a shift in strategic thinking, preemptive, and absolute destruction as a tool of statecraft, a precursor to later concepts of total war. Consider the human perspective: tens of thousands killed, enslaved or displaced, generations erased, families destroyed, culture dismantled, cities and knowledge lost forever. Yet Rome celebrates victory, and history debates morality. The tension between triumph and atrocity remains unresolved. Carthage exists now in historical texts: Polybius, Appian, Livy fragments, archaeological ruins, Bursa Hill, Punic harbors, remnants of temples, cultural memory, the idea of defiance, resilience, and the consequences of empire. The city's destruction teaches that power can erase existence, but it cannot erase memory. Its story endures as a testament to courage, resistance, and the human cost of ambition. Rome enjoys unchallenged dominance, yet must carry the moral weight of annihilation. Carthage becomes a cautionary tale: how fear of resurgence can justify obliteration. Scholars today study the city's rise and fall to understand geopolitics, urban resilience, and the psychology of empire. Modern archaeology, including the work of Charles Picard and Richard Miles, reconstructs Carthaginian life, trade, religion, and urban planning, bridging 2,000 years between memory and reality. Did Rome win in a material sense but lose morally? Does the lesson of Carthage suggest that fear-driven power can destroy rivals, yet also erode the humanity of the victor? History remembers Rome and mourns Carthage. The Mediterranean waves lap quietly. Ghosts of Carthage rise from sand and memory. Empires fall, but memory survives. Carthage, though erased, teaches lessons that resonate across millennia: resilience, courage, the cost of fear, and the shadow of ambition.